It's okay. Don't worry about it. Well, you can collapse this too, so nobody else
angry people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are a gentle, angry people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. Lands of many colors. We are a land of many colors, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are a land of many colors, and we are singing, singing for our lives. All in this together. We are all in this together, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are all in this together, and we are singing, singing for our lives. Peaceful, loving people. Peaceful. We are a peaceful, loving people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are a peaceful, loving people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. Justice-seeking people. We are a justice-seeking people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are a justice-seeking people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. Young and old together. We are young and old together, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are young and old together, and we are singing, singing for our lives. Sisters, daughters. We are mothers, sisters, daughters, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are mothers, sisters, daughters, and we are singing, singing for our lives. Gay and straight together. We are gay and straight together, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are gay and straight together, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are a gentle, angry people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are a gentle, angry people, and we are singing, singing for our Everybody see. If let it out, let it out now. Let it out, let it out, let it out now. Let it out, let it out, let it out now. Can't you understand? Let it out, let it out, let it out now. It won't get quiet, no. Let it out, let it out, let it out now. We gotta speak that for this. Let it out, let it out, let it out now. It won't get quiet, no. Let it out, let it out, let it out now. Let it out, let it out, let it out now. Let it out, let it out, let it out now.
Are you doing video? Yeah, it's okay. No worries.
Hello everyone, we're going to get started now. We would like to thank everyone for coming out today and showing their support. We organized this march today because we wanted to remind the community what a vital role science plays in our everyday lives. Okay. We would like to thank everyone for coming out and showing their support today. We organized this march because we wanted to remind the community what a vital role science plays in our everyday lives. We would like to give a special thanks to Kelly Darcy, Madison Barnes, and Lauren's staff who did a great job in keeping our social media going, and at all of our helpers today. If anybody needs any help, our helpers will be wearing a blue lanyard like this. I would like to introduce Winnie Brinks and LeGrand now.
Thank you. All right. What a great crowd. This is awesome. So I'm Winnie Brinks. I'm a state representative for half the city of Grand Rapids, and this is my colleague. This is my colleague David LeGrand. He represents the other half of the city. And we're here today to let you know that we support science too. There's nothing more important than science when it comes to informing our policies at the state level. And as we consider different things that come in front of us, we want you to know that that's important to us when it comes to protecting our water, when it comes to public health, when it comes to things like immunizations, when it comes to protecting our environment and ensuring clean water. So, thank you for coming out today. Thank you for your support for good, sound public policy that's based on science, and keep making your voice heard. There will be a lot of opportunities, I think, for us to make sure that we are coming out and making sure that science has its proper place in public policy. So, one last thing I want to say is I love coming to rallies and seeing all the signs. So if you can hold up all those signs, let's see them. Woo, that's great. Okay, keep them up because I need to take a picture. Nice job, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Morning, everybody. It's a great day, huh? It turns out, even though it looked like the sun rose this morning, everybody here understands that the Earth rotates around the sun, right? Right. It turns out that's not a matter of opinion. It turns out you don't get to choose your facts on that one, right? So I am so glad you are all here. I hope that you all keep engaged. What I say at all of these rallies is, my deep fear, look around. Look at this group. Did you see this kind of action before the election? You're all woke, right? Well, stay awake. Stay awake. Because we have to take rational discussion in this country back. We've got to take belief in the truth back. We've got to take belief in our fellow citizens back. We've got to take belief in community back. We've got to believe in the promise of the Statue of Liberty and not the threat of the walls of an incarceration nation. So, this is a great theme today, and I'm just going to leave you with one thought from one of my heroes, Stephen Colbert, who 10 years ago, I think, pointed out that reality has a well-known liberal bias.
Our first speaker today will be Bill Wood. Conservation has been at the heart of Bill Wood's professional career. He came to West Michigan Environmental Action Council by way of work in Kentucky and Pennsylvania with Habitat for Humanity. Initiatives under Bill's guidance kept over 1 million pounds of building material out of the waste stream, reducing impact on local watersheds and earning over $1.5 million for habitat programs. His work at WMEAC has promoted innovative and actualized ways to reduce waste and increase sustainability. Please welcome Bill Wood now. Thank you.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Going to try to do what I can with the science of this mic. We're going to keep this short and sweet because I know we're here to march and not talk. Just wanted to say a few words real quick today about how science impacts us at WMEAC. As the director of WMEAC, the West Michigan Environmental Action Council, we specialize in environmental advocacy and education, and all the work that I do and that we do is grounded in science. It's the application of the scientific method and the data that we gather that help us understand environmental issues like lead poisoning in children and rising temperatures and changing climate conditions globally. And it's also in science that we will find solutions to these environmental problems. Although I worked as a field researcher on a large-scale species monitoring project for several years, my background is actually in social work. One of the first most fundamental principles that social work students learn about is the concept of primary, secondary, and tertiary interventions. To briefly review this concept, a primary intervention is where you set up preventative or prophylactic measures to keep a problem from arising. Secondary intervention occurs after the problem or transgression has taken place and is an attempt to mitigate or reverse the effects of the issue. And tertiary interventions acknowledge that the damage has mostly been done, but attempt to soften the impacts of the event on those who are experiencing them. I always say that America is a great country at solving problems, but we don't have a great track record at keeping problems from occurring. So you might give us a B+ in secondary intervention, but a D in primary intervention. As certain segments of our society have begun to cast doubt on the science of climate change and attempt to weave that doubt into American policy at home and abroad, I'm concerned that we will be forced into tertiary intervention mode. The clock is ticking on our time to put innovative science-based solutions into practice and keep the approach to climate change somewhat in the secondary intervention phase. I know some people think we're past that point, but I do not. That's why I march for science today. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Our next speaker is a young woman who is turning her dreams into reality at the Van Andel Research Institute. Please welcome Dr. Brittany Carpenter.
Hello. Thank you so much for coming out today for the March for Science. I would also like to thank the Association for Women in Science West Michigan for asking me to speak today. So I want to share with you a little bit about why I became a scientist, why I believe we're making a real difference, and what it's going to take for science to succeed in the future. I grew up in rural Appalachian Kentucky, in a small town where you know everyone's name. And like many places in Michigan, Appalachian Kentucky is an area of health disparity, especially when it comes to cancer incidence and death. Growing up in this small town, I knew many individuals who lost their battle with cancer, including both of my grandmothers. I have made it my life goal to join the number of scientists who work toward providing a better understanding of how cancer develops in an effort to fight mortality associated with this disease. Working toward this goal, last year I received my PhD in molecular and cellular biochemistry from the University of Kentucky. I did this while studying invasive pancreatic cancer. I moved to Grand Rapids for a postdoctoral fellowship because I believe that this is one of the best places in the nation to perform groundbreaking, impactful scientific research. And unique to Grand Rapids, Michigan, is a community that is incredibly supportive of scientific research and clinical care, with multiple institutions providing employment for thousands of people, all contributing to a better scientific understanding of our world. My objective in the laboratory is to determine why drugs that are currently used to treat leukemias are effective at killing cancer cells. I do this in an effort to understand mechanisms that will lead to better therapies that extend the lives of cancer patients. I consider myself incredibly fortunate to be in Grand Rapids because not only do I have the opportunity to further my career, but I also can make a difference in the lives of people affected by cancer, and that includes many of you. In my tenure as a scientist, I have seen our approach to treating cancer patients become more precise, more innovative, and most importantly, more effective, ultimately saving the lives of thousands of people. We are learning how to repurpose FDA-approved drugs to treat different diseases such as cancer, saving precious years of research and millions of dollars in drug development costs. Through molecular testing, we are finding ways to personalize treatments so that we can use the most effective combination of drugs for destroying tumor cells in an individual while minimizing the often terrible side effects associated with generic chemotherapy. We are learning how to use immunotherapy to take advantage of patients' natural immune defense system to fight cancer. Amazingly, we can take a patient's immune cells and in the laboratory reprogram them, then reintroduce them, allowing these cells to recognize and destroy tumors. Lastly, we are figuring out how to combine different treatments so that maximum clinical benefit is achieved, and this has resulted in a huge expansion in the number of available clinical trials. All of these advances in cancer research give hope to people who had previously run out of options for treating their cancers. However, I know that we can do better. You see, I am proud to be part of a very unique community, a community where data and evidence drive our decision-making process. A community where people from different fields break down barriers and come together in order to drive scientific progress forward. A community where the majority of us willingly work longer hours than required just to make a difference. And a community where our daily actions have the potential to impact generations to come. We, scientists, have been entrusted by the public, by each of you, with a mission. And that mission is to understand the world that we live in, and we are working diligently to achieve that goal. We will only continue to succeed at making scientific advances with the support of our communities and our government, who are made up of individuals who have benefited from the life-saving treatments and cures made possible by dedicated scientists. From our community, we need your confidence in our ability to conduct objective, rigorous research with the goal of working towards a better community, a better planet, and more longevity for human life. You see, we do this by using the scientific method, a systematic process to test hypotheses using a variety of approaches in an effort to generate a solid foundation for our conclusions. Our data and the conclusions that we draw are subjected to a rigorous review process by fellow scientists in our field. This ensures that only the highest quality of science reaches the public. We also need your voices. We need your voices that we are making a difference in your daily lives, and that you trust our judgment to ask and appropriately test critical questions for the benefit of humankind. And from our government, we need scientific freedom, and we need the means to continue our work. A large portion of scientific research is made possible through government investment in peer-reviewed scientific proposals and innovative approaches for testing difficult questions. Government agencies like the National Institutes of Health and the National Science Foundation give the brightest minds in the world the funds to examine rare diseases or neglected areas of study. Without this support, the advances that we have seen in treatments for cancer and other diseases would have never been possible. The development of a single drug or vaccine that saves the lives of even a few individuals, in my opinion, is always a huge return on investment. Therefore, in order to continue our progress and work towards cures, we are in dire need of continued government support. So today, I march for science because of two of my grandmothers, who both lost their battle with cancer. I am marching for scientific discovery and for a better understanding of our world. And I am marching for each of you, with the confidence that the work that we do in the laboratory will have a positive effect on your lives and lives for generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Brittany. Our next speaker will be Dr. Douglas Kinchy. Dr. Douglas Kinchy has had a long career engaged in science. He received a PhD in mathematics from the University of Wisconsin and also did graduate study at the Divinity School of University of Chicago. He served as Dean of the Science and Mathematics Division at Grand Valley State University for 28 years and is currently GVSU Professor of Mathematics and Philosophy and the Director of the Kaufman Interfaith Institute. Last November, he was invited by the government of Oman to consult with their Ministry of Religious Affairs on their religious tolerance program. He was one of 10 invitees and the only one from the United States. With his background, he is the perfect person to speak to the intersection of science and religion. Please welcome Dr. Kinchy.
Thank you very much. In my over 20 years as Dean of Science, I loved science events and rallies. How many of you have been involved in the Science Olympiad that's held every year at Grand Valley? Either you or your kids are great. This reminds me of a Science Olympiad event, except you're a little bit older, but that's okay. That's okay. But this is a great view, so I want to see all the science. I want to get a picture of this. Great, thank you, thank you, thank you. So yes, I am committed to science. That's been my career, that was my graduate training, and I am aware, as you are now, of the speakers you've already heard, of the powerful impact of science on our lives. Just think, in the last 100 years, how our lives have changed, how our ability to communicate around the world has changed, how our ability to transport ourselves and materials all over the world. I'm personally interested in that because I have a daughter who married a German. I have 4 German grandkids, and I love the fact that I can get to Germany faster than my wife's parents could come from New York to Michigan to visit our grandkids. Think of that, and we've already heard it, think of the powerful impact on our health. How many of us, we're at an age group I think we might know, how many of us would be alive today without medical science and what we have discovered through medical science. I know many people before the current therapies, before the current scientific knowledge, who have not made it to the age that many of us are right here. But E.O. Wilson, the famous Harvard entomologist, said that we are drowning in information while starving for wisdom. Science is powerful, no question about it. But how we use the science is a question of values. And here's where we need to come together. We need to work together. We can no longer have a divide. About 100 years ago, Alfred North Whitehead said, when we consider what religion is for mankind and what science is, it is no exaggeration to say that the future course of history depends upon the relationships between them. We have here the two strongest forces which influence humanity. They seem to be pitted against one another, the force of religious institutions and the force of our impulse of accurate observation and logical deduction. Fortunately, 100 years later, there is a thawing of that relationship. The divide cannot help our cause. We need science and religion working together. I saw the slide back here, climate change is real. Pope Francis recently said, on climate change there is a clear, definitive, ethical imperative to act. Again, quoting E.O. Wilson in his book, The Creation, an appeal to the religious community to help save our planet. And he speaks to ministers and leaders of all faith. We need your help. The creation is the glory of the earth. Let's see if we can't get together on saving it, because science and religion are the most powerful social forces on earth. We can do it together. Yes, we need science and religion working together. And I believe a key component of that is this concept of pluralist explanation. Science is wonderful in explaining things at the physical level, but there are other explanations. There are other things on how our values are formed. Many of you, and almost all of you, I'm sure, are here because you support science, but you're also here because you have certain values. You have values of human dignity. You have values that either come from your philosophy or from your religious upbringing or from the depth of your religious understanding. So we need to understand and bring the power of science together with the values that are incorporated. This pluralistic understanding is not a hard concept for science to understand. After all, we have physics and chemistry and biology and geology and mathematics, different ways of understanding, looking at different kind of questions and coming up with different explanations. I like to use the example of if I come and see a candle burning and I said, why is that candle burning? I could give a physical explanation. I could talk about complex hydrocarbons, how they combine with oxygen, produce carbon dioxide, a little bit of H2O, and of course some heat and light. Or I could give a practical explanation. Why is the candle burning? Oh, because I lit a match. I could also give a purposeful explanation. Why is the candle burning? Back. Closer. Why is that candle burning? It's burning because of a birthday party, or because of a menorah, or because of a baptism celebration. Or the purpose of it burning might be because someone is getting ready to light a fuse on a bomb. So the purposeful explanation is sometimes very important. It's not what science studies, but it is an expression of our values and how we understand things. So science often almost always asks that practical, physical question. In practice, we often give the practical one, but the purposeful answer is also very, very important. So, if we look deeply beyond the so-called divide between science and religion, I suggest there are three basic values that both science and religion hold that we can build on as we find ways of working together. The first one is curiosity. Science operates out of curiosity. And so does religion. Religion and philosophy and people understanding their values are trying to make sense of the world, of our lives, of what it's all about. The second thing that we have in common is a commitment to truth and honesty. One of the worst things a scientist can do is be accused of falsifying data. Science is committed to truth. Science is committed to honesty. And good religion has that same commitment and that same desire. But the third and perhaps most important thing that we have in common, but we don't often exhibit it. We should have in common a commitment to humility. Science needs to be humble because in the history of science, we have found how many times we've been wrong and have had to be corrected. And science has a wonderful method to do that correction. But religion also must be humble, because from all of our religious traditions, we know there's a difference between the infinite and the finite. We know there's a difference between the God of creation and our human limitedness. And so we need to be humble as well. And I'm struck by Sir Isaac Newton, perhaps the greatest scientist of all time, when he said, "I don't know what it may seem to the world, but as to myself, it's only been like a boy playing on the seashore and diverting myself now and then to find another smoother pebble or a prettier shell than ordinary, while the great ocean of truth lies undiscovered before me." Also, that same idea, that same concept was given by the famous anthropologist Jane Goodall when she said, "There are many windows through which we can look at the world searching for meaning. Most of us peer through but one of these windows, and even that one is often misted over by the breath of our finite humanity." And in the religious Christian community, we know that the Apostle Paul says, "For now we see through a glass darkly, but then we will see face to face." We don't see everything in its perfection. I want to conclude with, I think, a beautiful poetic statement from the mathematician Keith Devlin, who says, "How do we best understand a flower? Who best understands the flower? Is it the person who sees it with her own eyes in the field? Or is it the painter who captures the subtleties on canvas? Or the botanist who knows how to germinate and how it grows? Or the biochemist who understands the chemical processes that keep it alive and give it color? Or the poet who captures its beauty in words and likens it to aspects of the human condition? Or the blind person who perceives it by scent and touch? Or the musician who sees it swaying in the breeze and captures its motion in the melody? The poet or painter who remains ignorant of chemistry, biology, and mathematics is deprived in his understanding and vision of the flower, just as is the scientist who is blind to the flower's beauty. Surely there is no one way to view and understand a flower, or even a unique best way. There are many ways, and some are appropriate for a particular purpose, but that's another issue. In terms of understanding an aspect of our world, the more ways we have to understand a flower, the greater will be that understanding. That's a pluralistic understanding of a flower. I would argue we need a pluralistic understanding of the universe, of reality. We need science and religion working together to make that the best kind of community that we all want to live together. So thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you, Dr. Kinsey. Our final speaker is Jasmine Ward. Jasmine Ward is a graduating senior at the GVSU Occupational Therapy Program. Upon graduation, Jasmine will travel the nation as a traveling therapist, but aims within her career to begin identifying the impact of occupation on various marginalized populations. Jasmine currently has begun this work as a graduate assistant in recreation at GVSU, where she works to identify ways that sports and recreation differ and works to make those spaces more inclusive. Please welcome Jasmine.
Thank you. In 1789, Michael Underwood first described infantile paralysis as debility of the lower extremities. In 1894, the first outbreak of the childhood paralysis occurred in the United States, with nearly 132 cases impacting children across the nation. By 1950, the epidemic continued to spread and hit its peak with nearly 58,000 cases, 3,145 of those cases being fatal. In 1953, the first vaccine to be deemed clinically safe was released for clinical research. Nearly 2 million children participated in these trials, and by 1957, the incidence of the disease reduced by 57%. Through science and research, the world began to understand, treat, and essentially eradicate polio. Throughout history, science has been the foundation of the health professions. It is how we have grown to understand and treat the body. Often, science is most commonly linked to the natural sciences. Yet, in rehabilitation, science has served as a quintessential component of healthcare. Occupational therapy works to restore occupations or activities that restore activities to those who have lost them. Often, this rehabilitative field works with patients who have experienced a stroke, heart attack, cancer, or a traumatic brain injury. In September 2016, an independent study found occupational therapy to be the only healthcare profession where additional spending reduced readmission rates in hospitals. Essentially, the study found we were doing our jobs and we were doing it well. Researchers found that the focus on client-centeredness, which included physical and psychosocial components to the patient, improved the overall quality, health, and well-being of the patients. Outside of healthcare, studies have suggested our powerful impact in emerging practice areas such as domestic abuse shelters, refugee camps, and homeless shelters. My graduate research studied the impact of occupational therapy with families experiencing homelessness in Grand Rapids. Through qualitative and quantitative research, we found that occupational therapists have an impact on many types of patients and many types of settings. And this pattern of research is foundational to healthcare. Without science, we have no healthcare. Within healthcare, however, I aim to work with marginalized populations in recognizing the impact of health disparities. Those interactions between patient and doctor we would have never thought to explore have began to be explored. Disparities and bias have been clinically illustrated in cardiac diagnoses, prescriptions of pain, immunizations, surgical treatment for lung cancer, and 175 other scientific-based evidence have began to document these other biases. The Robert Wood Johnson Foundation has found that Latinos and African Americans experience 30% to 40% poorer health outcomes in their surgical treatment. Specific diseases such as diabetes, breast cancer, and heart disease are experienced worse for patients of color. Through science, we've demonstrated the impact of health disparities, and through science, we found that we need to change this. The current presidential administration has questioned the value of science and specifically the funding of research. While the president's statements on vaccines, climate change, and Ebola have demonstrated a flagrant disregard for science and its results, the most recent budget cuts to NASA climate missions have demonstrated that science is truly at risk. Yeah, boo to that. When we devalue one type of science, we begin to devalue them all. Measles, mumps, cholera, climate change, endangered species, lands, they are all at risk because of the political climate that devalues science. Through science, we've understood the human body, and through science, we will continue to understand the human body. When we value science, we value our livelihood. When we value science, we value the earth. We must value science, not silence. Thank you.
Thank you, Jasmine. Let's give a hand for all the speakers and for our ASL interpreter. This is Misty Rayfield, and she is donating her time for us today. Thank you very much, Misty. Okay. I'm curious, some of the comments on Facebook were that, all right. Some of the comments on Facebook were, are there going to be scientists there? So I would like to see now those who are scientists raise their signs, and those that are here just supporting us, give them a yell. As you're marching today, maybe you can say to someone, what is your research? What are you trying to teach? What do you do in science? And let's all get to know a little bit more about what science really is, okay? You've been a great audience, and I know a lot of you are getting anxious to move, but I have some very important announcements. First of all, I hope you appreciate the loveliness of this place for us to have a conversation, and I appreciate it if you would please take everything with you that you brought in, so that there's, don't leave anything behind. The other thing is, we live in a pretty remarkable city. A lot of people think a lot of Grand Rapids, and I think rightly so. They are allowing us to do this walk and gather and hoot and holler with no cost and no permit, as long as we follow their rules. So as you're marching today, I hope that you will remember to stay on the sidewalk, stop at red lights, and don't put stickers or posters or other things in places where they shouldn't be. Okay, that's not hard. And that will show the community that we really appreciate them allowing us to do this. Okay. The next thing is, this movement that started back in January after the Women's March has grown into 600 satellite marches in addition to the march in Washington. The organizers of the National March realize that they've caught on to something and they don't want to let it go. Tomorrow morning, the website March for Science will become We Marched. And on We Marched, you will find a series of things that they're going to do for the next week. It's called a week of action. Every day will have its own focus for people to talk about, advocate for, do an event for, or whatever. And from there on, they would like the satellite marches to start like a chapter of an organization. If any of you are interested in continuing on with your advocacy or support for science, please register on the national website. It's marchforscience.org, and you will be informed of things that they're doing and what's going on with science. So, with those things in mind, it's my pleasure to ask you to follow the banner, which will be out here. The bridge got taken away from us, but there's a cider festival going on that you might want to stop at later on. Just can't play anything in this place. So anyway, take the banner. We're going to march down Fulton to Monroe. We're going to stop at Rosa Parks Circle and let the whole world see how many we have here. And then we'll move on around Monroe Center, back down Fulton to Rosa Parks Circle. Okay? All right. Let's go.